vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
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 Aye. And anyone opposed?
Aye.
Against.
Councillor Stewart opposed. Did you want that recorded, Councillor?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Stewart opposed. Thank you very much. And now we move on to, I think we might just have a 5-minute cup of tea, bathroom stop staff to have a break away from their screens. So we'll come back at 2:35, so a 6-minute break. Thank you. Now we move very quickly to item 12. Oh, our submission on the proposed Kaimongo Matiatia Marine Reserve submission, and Councillor Coombe has said she would like to move the recommendations. Anyone else happy to second? Otherwise, I'm happy to second.
I'll second. It's Angela.
Kia ora, Angela. Thank you. Councillor Dalton will second, and we'll go straight to Dave and Jackie on their presentation.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to this item. Just to introduce Jackie Reid, who's a Senior Analyst within the Natural Environment Strategy Unit, and she'll be providing the presentation today, which gives you an overview of our approach to this submission. And then, of course, we'll be able to both answer questions that you may have thereafter. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Dave. Kia ora. I'd just like to acknowledge the technical staff who provided a contribution to this report, the local board mana whenua input. Next slide, please, to add. Thank you. Just to know that Council's been involved with spatial planning and discussions of marine protections area in the Hauraki Gulf for quite a long time. Council was notified in January of this application, and the applicant is Friends of the Hauraki Gulf. Council recently supported the Rahui around Waiheke Island, and so this marine reserve application is another stepping stone on that journey of increasing marine protection in the areas in the Gulf. So I'm going to talk briefly about the area, the approach taken by staff, and we also approached for input and feedback from the local board of mana whenua, and these are in attachments A and B, and the combined input informs the submission in attachment C. Next slide, please. So the proposed marine reserve area is 2,350 hectares on the northwest side of Waiheke Island. An ecological survey was undertaken at selected sites, and the area proposed has an ecological value, has complex ecosystems, is highly biologically diverse, has inner and outer reefs, kelp beds, and has good underwater structure for marine life. Next slide, please. You might recognise this map. It's the government response to sea change map. It has identified areas for high protection in the wider Gulf. The purple square, if you can find it, it's in the bottom left of the map, is approximately the proposed marine reserve area. I'd also like to highlight the ones numbered 4, 5 and 14, and we've brought these out of the map to show you the ones nearest to the proposed marine reserve. I quite like this slide because it gives you the scale of the Gulf, the areas that we need to look after, the areas for scientific study, those that we want to protect for biodiversity and to keep species safe from fishing pressure. And I'd like to acknowledge the Rahui around Waiheke Island that's not actually shown on this map, but that's subsequent to the map being produced. Next slide, please. So the approach that we undertook to assess the application was using the criteria under the Marine Reserve Act. We looked at planning issues, impact or constraints, and then we looked for gaps in the application that were identified by the technical staff, local board, and the views and input from mana whenua. So the report goes into quite a bit of detail, but in summary, we found no significant or likely impacts from a planning perspective. From adjacent land use or structures. We did not anticipate any impact to navigation, commercial fishing or existing aquaculture. We agreed that the proposed area has ecological value, but recognised that this may be similar to other areas like the northeast of Waiheke and surrounding areas. So in assessing the application, there are areas needing further assessment and clarification. And the report covers this, but I'll bring up some key points in the next slide, please. So there was overwhelming consensus for those providing input into the report that we were supporting the protection and enhancement of marine biodiversity in the Hauraki Gulf. That there was support in principle for the marine reserve application, but there was further clarification and assessment required. The first one, and importantly, was engagement with mana whenua. So council staff heard views from Ngāti Porou Trust Board, Ngāti Porou Iwi Trust, Ngātai, and we have included their views and content in the submission. And we really would like to see the enablement of kaitiakitanga. The second one was to assess again the ecological area proposed. Feedback was the extent, the area and boundaries, and also any impact on recreational fishing and pressure that may move to other rohi. The next one was how this application aligns with the wider government response strategy and the marine protected areas proposed. And these matters and the submission reflects the feedback from those who inputted. Next slide, please. So we look to seek two decisions. One's to approve the submission, attachment C, on the proposed marine reserves, subject to any minor editorial changes that may be made, and to delegate authority to approve the final submission. And the final submission would be the 18th of March to meet the 20th of March deadline, which is Sunday. Gora, thank you. Back to Chair.
Thank you very much. Very clear presentation and also very fulsome but clear submission. I think there's been a lot of work gone into this, and the discussions we've had have been really interesting. If there doesn't seem to be any questions, I assumed there would be, as there's quite a lot to this submission, but I'm not going to beg anyone to ask questions if they don't want to. Oh, so, Councillor Watson. Question.
Yes, you'd never say that you don't want to beg anyone to answer a question. It's always going to get someone to ask it. Yes. Just a quick question on that last point in terms of the resolutions that we've got before us, A and B. So what we approve here is our submission. So in the first instance, that's only subject to minor editorial changes. That's like kind of minor grammatical and word changes if appropriate, I assume. And similarly, in terms of the delegated authority, that final submission essentially is just those minor editorial changes that are made. That's the correct assumption, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I reserve the right to speak on this one, Mr. Chair. It's a good supportive submission. So I've had a run through of this with the Hauraki Golf Forum, but I'd just like to make a few comments at the appropriate juncture. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Watson. Now I wondered, you sent Dave through some very fulsome points of mana whenua feedback that wasn't. Did you want to further talk about that briefly, or?
Yeah, maybe there's a couple of points I should make, maybe, yes. And that is that as we kind of outlined in the consideration of this application, we're sort of wondering how this might relate to a significant work program by central government in the government response strategy to sea change, and that's got a number of marine protection areas that are proposed through that process. But in addition to that, it's got other work streams as well that relate to fisheries management, protected species, a number of other things that are all going in concert. And so this is really a case of saying there's a lot of momentum by central government to get some of those marine reserve or high protection areas, as they're called, advanced through that central government process. And then there's also the interrelationship between how we consider, or how Auckland Council considers this particular application in light of that. Of course, those are matters for DOC to grapple with, because this is very much about Auckland Council making a submission for then DOC to consider those matters. One of the issues I took the opportunity to ring Laurie Beamish from Ngātai Ki Tamaki earlier this week, because I sort of wanted just to establish kind of where they were at with this particular application. They indicated that they had a number of concerns which should have really underlined the desire to see how marine protection initiatives were networked and collated together, so that there was an understanding between the various adjacent rohe moana and also different values that are expressed in the Gulf as to how that would all fit together, which is very much what the government response strategy does. So Laurie did indicate to me that he did not feel that there had been, he was not comfortable at this stage for Ngātai Tamaki to support this application at this particular point in time. So I guess it does add another dimension to one of our qualifications, which is we think that the applicant and DOC need to do some further engagement with mana whenua just to see how this particular application should be advanced. And I think what staff have tried to do here is we've tried to say, we think that in principle there is some value here, and it's really about saying how can we still express that, and at the same time suggest to DOC through Auckland Council that there may be there's clearly some issues that need to be further clarified.
Kia ora, Dave. Thank you. I hope that gives some more clarity for some of the information we couldn't have by the time we got the report done. Question from Member Wilson.
Thank you both. Very clear in terms of the submission. It was very good too, David, at the end. It would be really good to tease out the notion of, as you've expressed, DOC has indicated there's more work to be done in the mana whenua space. And so given that, is that the view, or should that be the view in this submission from Auckland Council, that's DOC's that's DOC's domain, so to speak? How would you configure the place from a Auckland Council perspective, taking into account at least one of the Ngāti Pawa entities, and now Ngātai has expressed what they've expressed? How do you think that should configure in terms of the submission, for instance?
Yes, so I think in the submission we have highlighted that, you know, this is one of the things we think needs to be addressed, is like if you were to go in, if DOC and the applicant was to go and consider further engagement with mana whenua, there'd be a much stronger basis on which to recommend to the Minister of Conservation from DOC officials what would be the appropriate outcome or recommendation for this application. So we have weaved it into the submission as it's set out now. You know, again, if that's something that needs to be slightly emphasised, we're happy to just tweak that a bit. You know, it is one of our key areas that we think is wanting, you know, that we think this application does need a bit of focus. So we can hopefully tweak that in the relevant paragraph as required.
Mr. Chair, if it can be woven just or slightly tweaked to re-emphasise what you've just said, I think that would be helpful in terms of the Auckland Council submission. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Member Wilson. Do you think, I'm not sure if we need to put a resolution, but if we were able to slightly alter, would you say in the executive summary, Jackie or Dave, in number 3, could we strengthen that part that the topic areas include, for example, etc., working with Ngāti Pawa, Iwi Trust, Ngāti Pawa Trust Board and mana whenua to determine their aspirations? Is there something additional, Member Wilson, that we could put there?
No, I'm confident with the staff that they know where to emphasise and in which part, and if that could be done, then yes.
Cool. I'll just need to ensure for everyone about to support what that, Dave, what you think that wording might say, just going back to Councillor Watson's point that it would be minor editorial. So just want to make sure that he feels confident that the thrust of the submission is the same, and that wouldn't be necessarily just editorial if we're changing.
Yeah, my broad observation would be that it's consistent with the theme or the direction that we're stating, and that all we're doing is we're just putting a slight emphasis on that to make that a bit more explicit. For me, that would still be within the realm of my editorial changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to ensure that I wasn't end up making anyone feel like we were changing too much. But I think it would be good to, would it be potentially added into the item 9? Maybe you could add a bit more fulsome about your later discussions.
Yes, we can do it.
So we could add.
Yep.
Yeah, and then Ngāi could have their own. So then we were clear about what we do know now.
Yes. Yep. Paragraph 9. Yep.
Do you feel that would be sufficient, Member Wilson?
Most definitely. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Perfect. Any other pātai? No? Perfect. Cool. Thank you, both Jackie and Dave. I think that's. I think people are pretty happy with the direction, and there's been a ton of work done on this, and I know it has been tricky to try and get a supportive submission that also doesn't preclude the need to do a lot more work in the space for a successful, direction for a high protection area or a marine protection, which is what we all want in the end of things. So thank you very much, and I'll get you to click off your screen so we're not debating at you. Thank you for that. And I will let Councillor Coombe, Deputy Chair, did you want to speak as the mover now, or would you like to speak at the end? You do not have to speak either, but I'll just checking.
Thanks, Chair. If I could just reserve my right to close, just.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, you now have the speaking turn.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'm glad that our submission is a supportive one. It certainly deserves to be. If any, it may be a little understated, but as long as we're emphasising that principle, because certainly in respect of what we've heard in the Hauraki Gulf Forum, there is a real need for this type of marine reserve. The most recent State of the Gulf report 2020 makes for some pretty disturbing reading in terms of the health of the Gulf out there. 57% decline in key fish stocks, 83% in snapper, 76% in crayfish, 100% in green lip mussels, 86% in shark, and 97% whales and dolphins, and so forth and so on. So there's a real public support now for meaningful conservation action by taxpayer and ratepayer funded agencies such as the government and regional councils. And of course, this is what we've got before us today. Our submission to this proposal that's been put up in northwest Waiheke, which I might add, if it's successful, will be the first marine reserve in the Hauraki Gulf since Tawharanui, way back in 2010 through the ARC. That's over 12 years ago now. It's the first application for a marine reserve by a community group since Waiheke Forest and Bird in the 1990s. So we want to encourage this sort of innovation and this sort of response to this, this what was really a crisis in the Gulf. 2,350 hectares would make it the largest marine reserve in the Gulf, and currently less than 0.5% of the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park, despite its legislated national significance, is in a protected no-take marine reserve. I'd say that again, 0.5%. 2,350 hectares would, just with one stroke of the pen, almost double the size of the area protected. So that's the scale of what we're talking about here. It's significant, and it will make a valuable contribution. The actual reserve itself is geologically remarkable, as we saw in our report. Has extensive underwater platforms and terraces and a remarkably preserved kelp bed. So this is a special part of our marine environment. As far as support for this goes, I mentioned the general public on Waiheke itself, nearing 70% of the island residents, 67% support it. So, that's a pretty strong endorsement from, the most affected community there. And certainly in terms of the wider Waiheke community, the young people of Waiheke that have an ideal outdoor education facility just on their doorstep. Economically, at the Hauraki Gulf, we were told of a number of economic benefits that come from this sort of marine reserve. We had the study recently done up in Cape Rodney, which showed that over 10.5% of newly settled juvenile snappers were sampled up to 55 kilometres outside that Cape Rodney area. So these fish move around, and there's benefits to the wider population and the wider economy. And again, the scale of what's being proposed in northwest Waiheke is considerably more than Cape Rodney. So all up, Mr. Chair, this proposed marine reserve over time, I have absolutely no doubt would become a real treasure house in the same way that Goat Island has become, only on a far grander scale, the jewel in the crown, if you like, of the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park. I guess from our perspective here today, we've got an opportunity in our submission to do something tangible and meaningful to protect the Hauraki Gulf and the threatened wildlife. There's been a lot of talk and not much action, and for a long time now. Today we've got a chance to walk the talk and support this very worthy application that will benefit not just Waiheke but the broader Auckland region. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
I think Councillor Watson stolen most of my thunder, but two comments that I'd bolt on, and that is the relevance of this marine reserve for tourism and ecological research. It's accessible. There's already many people that go out to Waiheke for land-based activities, and probably not enough for things that are sea-based. And the other comment is that this will actually assist in reducing carbon emissions, because the kelp forest and the associated marine activity fixes carbon into the sea relatively quickly and efficiently. And the same thing applies to fish stocks. They also help to fix carbon. So that aspect's pretty important. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Was there any other last comments before we go to Deputy Chair, Councillor Coombe? No? Cool. And I would just brief comment from me. Yes, of course, we support the thrust and direction. We are taking quite a important approach here that supports the general thrust, but also ensures that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed before this goes through. And that's because we want the ultimate goal of more marine protection in the Hauraki Gulf. And as we know, as Councillor Watson said, it's taken a long time to move from where we are, which is a tiny percentage of the Gulf that's protected. So we want to get this right. And so the process, much like the Waiheke Local Board's process, is to support in principle, as long as the other parts in the submission have been done before we get there. But Councillor Coombe, I'll let you finish up, but thank you all for this, and thanks again to the staff for what is a really well put together submission on a complex issue.
Kia ora, Chair, and I would like to speak in support of our submission and the direction it's taking and the approach, and I think this is the right approach. It is DOC's process, and we are just submitting into that process, and it's for DOC to navigate the Marine Reserves Act requirements. The goal absolutely is, the scientists tell us that we need to have 30% of the Hauraki Gulf under marine protection, and I think Councillor Watson highlighted that it's currently at about 0.5%, and the Hauraki Gulf, Tipaka Moana Nui Atoi, is in a really dire state, with many species functionally extinct. And we saw that firsthand. The chair and I, and members of the Hauraki Gulf Forum and representatives from the museum and the Auckland University. We're able to travel to the noises recently and just see the devastation around the land there with the Kinner Barrens and just what is the dire state that the Gulf is in. And so, you know, we really do need to look at all the tools that we have for marine protection. And I just wanted to emphasise to members that marine reserves are just one of those tools. And what we're seeing is that we've got to just put in place the whole range of tools that we have to hand if we're ever going to achieve that 30% protection. And one thing about this marine reserve application, and thanks to the Friends of Hauraki Gulf who've made the application, and is the bit that the DOC really do need to grapple with, and that is the mana whenua engagement and how mana whenua are involved in this application and the implications for customary rights. And I think it's important to note that where we are seeing mana whenua working together and in partnership with the agencies around the Gulf, whether that's councils, the Crown, community groups, stakeholders, that's where we're seeing marine protection being put in place. And we've seen that across the Gulf. We heard at the Hauraki Gulf Forum meeting the other week that there's about 30% of the Gulf is now under some kind of rahui. So, and that is moving fast now. Mana whenua are really taking the lead and pushing for that action where they're being empowered and where they're taking the lead and where there are partnerships. And that is a big gap in the Marine Reserves Act that doesn't talk to our treaty obligations or partnership. And, you know, there's been a big gap there because, you know, since 1977, when the Marine Reserves Act came into place, there've only been 4 marine reserves in the Hauraki Gulf. So because it is quite problematic. But, you know, this is for DOC to navigate all that. So I think, as I said at the beginning, I think this is the right approach to approve this submission, to support the Marine Reserve in principle, and that ask DOC to work through some of these issues that have been highlighted. And I've just spoken to one of those issues that I think does need to be addressed and worked through. But absolutely do support the goal of 30% marine protection, and it's great to hear the support that we're getting right around the council table and across the Hauraki Gulf for that goal. Kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Right, we have a mover, Councillor Coombe, and a seconder, Councillor Dalton. I feel like I'm losing my voice. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
I assume that was support, Councillor Walker.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, I think I called before you called. Okay, so there was no one opposed. We'll have that carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Suad. And 2 hopefully quick items. We'll go to item 13. Could I have a mover for the work program?
I'm happy to move, and could I make a quick comment on the work program when you get to that point?
Happy to second.
And Councillor Collins to second. Yep, is there any questions on this? I think the questions will be to maybe Vanessa or Megan if they're on the line, but if there's no questions, we can go to Councillor Coombe for comment. Were there any questions on the work program? Perfect, thank you. Councillor Coombe.
It's not often I get excited about the work program item, but I did just want to bring to members' attention that thanks to staff, we have added on to the work program a new piece of work that we hope to bring to the committee, which is the berm planting guidelines, which has been a real gap for the last decade that we haven't had community-focused berm planting guidelines. So I hope members will feel, you know, who've been watching this space for some time will feel excited as I do that we might have the chance to actually get this one sorted once and for all, and to be put forward some guidelines that the community can really get behind, and we'll have all those wonderful benefits as well that we all know about. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for adding that to the work program.
Thanks, Deputy Chair. Hopefully one day you will get your way on berms, and this is a good way to restart. I think that the last time you got it sorted, you got a 13-page summary back or something, as I remember, a long time ago. Right, we've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No, thank you. And on to the summary of memos and information briefings.
I'll move, Mr. Chairman. Kathy.
Councillor Casey has moved.
Collins.
And Collins has seconded. All those in favour?
And I put a question
Sorry.
up, Mr. Chair, before you took the vote.
Sorry about that, Councillor Watson. I wasn't watching the chat. So, Councillor Watson?
Yeah, thanks. I don't mean to prolong matters here, but just in terms of one of the documents that appears in this item 14, the one that discussing the road corridor weed management update, and I just really seek your guidance here, Mr. Chair. There's a document or memo there that updates a number of things that are happening in that space. I think if you recall, it's way back to 2020, November 12th, I think, that the last time we really had any meaningful contact with that. I am a little concerned with some of the content in there in terms of the feedback from local boards on information in terms of the shortlisted options. And my understanding is they might be seeking feedback, but there's been no sort of consultation or no workshop with local boards preceding that. The general tenor of the memo really, in my view anyway, is failing to give effect to the weed control policy, particularly the requirement to minimise agricultural use. And my real concern, Mr. Chair, and I would be asking what your suggested approach is, given some of the content, and this is particularly the addition of electric vehicles and electric water treating device to the thermal control, specifically hot water application. So what that all amounts to, Mr. Chair, is I've got a series of concerns with the direction of this. There is a program that's being laid out. It would appear that the local board, there's feedback being required that's not really been informed by very much, and certainly in respect of our position as governing body members, who I assume will vote on this at some point, we're totally in the dark. So I'm in your hands as to how you would suggest a number of concerns that I've got with regard of this memo might be addressed going forward.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Watson, and I had some of those questions as well when the memo came to be sent out, which was sent out to us, I think, a week or so ago. Megan, you might have some broader answers for Councillor Watson.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question, Councillor Watson. Yes, look, we did. We have acknowledged that the timeframes we were looking at, we can't meet anymore, just for a variety of reasons. So we are currently consulting with the local boards. What I will do is I will take the concerns I heard from you and talk with the staff directly who are working through that process, and just make sure we get together and that to ensure that consultation has been appropriate. If there are any concerns or questions, we will deal with those. And Councillor Watson, also really happy if you wanted to talk to me or email me kind of anything else or anything in particular. Happy to work with you on that as well.
Okay, thanks for that. I guess what I'm really asking is at what point is the governing body members going to be updated with some fairly significant changes of direction that have occurred since the resolution of November 12, 2020?
It is going to be late. Sorry, through the chair, it's going to be later in the year. From memory, we are working with the local boards now and looking at options. We'll give them an opportunity to provide their preference for weed control in about the middle of the year. So I suspect it's about the middle of the year, but I'm also happy to provide that clarification to the committee as well once I speak with staff.
Okay, thanks. I'll follow up with some specific questions in, Mr. Chair, given the offer of Megan. Thank you.
Thank you, that's perfect, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Thank you, Megan. Right, all those in favour? I think we may have already voted,
Aye.
but we can do it
Aye.
again. Aye. And those opposed? No. Right, and we'll just, was there anything else to add that we needed to, Kalinda? Right, we just want.
Yep, there's no consideration of extraordinary items.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. Before I have a closing karakia, just want to thank all members for sticking with it all day and for the very good questions and comments and respect of each other. And we also just want again to send best wishes to staff elected members affected by COVID at the moment and the stresses and strains as well as the illness that comes with that, and to your communities that you're all trying to support at the same time as doing our normal under these conditions work programs and bodies of work and committees. So thank you very much. If there is anyone who'd like to give a closing karakia, speak now. Otherwise, I will cover off where I am now. Awesome. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te urutapunui, ki wātia, ki a mama, ki a nāko, ki a tinana, me te wairua, e te tākatu, koia rā, e rongo, whaka irahia, ake ki runga, ki a tina, homie, huie, tai ki e.
Tai ki e. Kia ora, Mr. Chair.
Good, everyone, and I think I officially have lost my voice, so have a good afternoon, and thank you all. At that, I think we are done. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Good
Thank
afternoon.
you, Kakite.
Thank you,
Thank
Rita.
you.
Sorry, Karen, for calling you Karen Walker.